Welcome to Catalog and Cocktails, presented by Data.World. It's your honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime data nerd, product guy, customer guy over at Data.World, joined by Juan Cicada.
Hey, everybody. I'm Juan Cicada, the principal scientist at Data.World. And today it's a special episode. This is being recorded on Valentine's Day.
But
we're going to publish this later on. So you'll be listening to this later on. And like, what are these folks talking about?
Yeah.
Valentine's and
You
kindness.
You get to have love and kindness all over again a second day.
But today we're super excited to have a guest who's going to be talking about something that I still cannot believe when we get to this topic. It's Kristen Schuley. She's a senior manager of business intelligence at data delivery at Learning Care Group. Kristen, how are you doing?
Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So,
what are we cheersing to?
Let's cheers to the love of data. I think it's only fitting.
Love of data with our Valentine's and sunset mimosa here. So cheers.
Cheers to this. All right. So we have our warm-up question today, which is, what was your favorite class in school and why?
Okay, so I obviously, not only do I work for a learning organization, but I have always been a lifelong learner. And so I think my favorite class was actually when I was taking my MBA. I had a series, my concentration was on strategic leadership. And so we would always talk about why teams failed, why organizations failed, what made them successful, what made them not. But every time I go to class to set the mood, it was always at night. I was getting my MBA while I was working. So we'd go in, it's like 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. And you'd always say, all right, come to the clouds with me. We're going to talk about just anything and everything. We always had meaningful conversations about what people were experiencing in just in their work environments and what was happening. And I think for me, those classes, because there was a few of them, I loved them, and I still apply them to the team I have today. So I think we'll probably talk a little bit about that and kind of drive a little bit more as we go through it. But for me, so my favorite class in school was always the ones that really challenge your thinking and didn't really accept the norm. And so I don't have a specific one, but I'm always about just learning and growing and what shouldn't we be doing or what should we change? And so that was always a big thing for me.
That is great. I really love that.
Absolutely.
And,
I was thinking about just saying like, when I was a kid, math, but now you made it go.
Was math your favorite?
Well, yeah, but now I'm like thinking of something more profound that I could do.
What's more profound? For me, it was physics. My senior year physics class was my favorite class by far. And it was because of how passionate my physics teacher was. And that's where I knew that, well, in retrospect, I found that I was attracted to the passion. I went to college to study physics, and I ended up with a business degree. But that passion always sticks with me. So,
Absolutely.
Well, all right, there's a lot to cover here, and let's just kick it off. So, Kristen, honest, no BS. Hold on. So, Learning Care Group operates like over 1,000 schools in 39 states. It has 11 unique brands. There's 21,000 employees. You serve over 150,000 children, and the data team is of 5.
Yes.
That
enterprise reporting. The enterprise reporting team.
The enterprise reporting team for 21,000 employees is 5.
It's 5.
All right. How is this even
that
possible?
Sounds like BS. How's that possible?
It is a real thing. It is a real thing. So we are I think the epitome of teamwork. And I think if you look at our overall structure, and how we're structured as a company, it is all about teamwork. So I'm gonna back up. So specifically, our schools are earlyhood childhood care learning centers. So we have the license capacity from 6 weeks old to 12 years old. And so that's really our student base. That being said, our 21,000 employees, I would say a huge majority are teachers in our schools. And so when we think about how each school is ran and the enterprise reporting that is involved in that, it really centers around our audience becomes the school directors. So you've got the school director who becomes really the number one viewer of our reports. And then from there, our company has a district level, a region level, to a division level. And then we have our headquarters, which is Support Central, we call it. So you'll probably hear me reference Support Central a lot. That's our headquarters. And we got about 400 employees. So really, when we think about it, there's about 400 employees who support those 1,050 schools from behind the scenes. And so my team of 5, it is my leader, myself, and I have 3 analysts. We have partnered with every business unit within LCG to kind of ask the questions, what reporting do you need? What reporting can we change? And what story do you want to tell? And we work incredibly close with our friends in IT. So my team specifically is housed in finance. So we partner with our IT team. We work with them every single day because we personally do not own the data warehouse. So the data warehouse is on our data governance team. So we basically tap into the data warehouse, and that's how we start building our reports. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but yes, there's truly 5 of us. All of our enterprise reporting is done through Power BI, and it's been about 2.5 years to stand up this operation, and it is pretty remarkable what we do.
That's awesome. So it feels like you've got a support structure in here, despite the fact that the scale is pretty awesome and crazy. That you've got like sort of an IT team that's supporting you. You've got a governance team that's supporting you, and then you refer to your team as sort of the BI analytics group.
Yep. We're so our true titles are business intelligence and data delivery, but that's so long and everyone never remembers, so they just know us as the Power BI team. So I'm usually Kristen from the Power BI team.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Any of them. So that's who we are.
So one thing I like, you said, what report do you need? What reporting needs to change? And what story are you trying to tell? I mean, this is a very important takeaway. Things, because I think one of the gaps we see all the time is that the data teams, the tech teams, and the businesses are not that well connected and stuff. So how you say you partner very closely to the business units, like. So how many business units are there, and what is that relationship? What is that process? So let's get some lessons learned. What works well? What doesn't work? What are you learning?
So we learn something new every day. So we always joke about, or I say all the time, and I think my team rolls their eyes at me like every day is a school day. So what are we going to learn, right? And it's not because we're an education company, but that's really what happens. So we kicked it off, and I said, my concentration was about why teams fail and why they succeed and why, we apply that every single day. So the first thing I would say is that when people ask what I do for a living or what my team does, I always say we're in the business of storytelling, but we have to tell an accurate story. And sometimes that story can be difficult, right? It's not going to be revenue is great every day. And, we have challenges that we need to make sure that we're telling an accurate story. So as far as how the team is structured, my leader really partners with kind of the overall big picture. And then I do a lot of the intake, the overall intake about like what's kind of going on, have sort of a pulse going. We'll get it probably into this about a lot of documentation, administrative work. So that's what I do. And then my team of 3 is super small, but they're amazingly mighty, and don't knock them down. So you asked how many business units do you have? I mean, we really have the basic ones that any organization would have. So finance, operations, marketing, but because we are a childhood care company, we also have a huge safety component. Number 1 rule, no one gets hurt. So we constantly have a pulse on just safety and of our children. We're hugely passionate about, obviously. And then from there, legal, IT, obviously. So we've got kind of those. So each analyst has sort of their niche. So I have one analyst who really partners just with HR. I forgot HR. They're obviously huge. We got 21,000 employees. So we've got, one analyst partners with HR. Another one's finance and operations, Grant. We've got another one who really works and focuses with marketing. The interesting thing is that we do have the same model with every business unit. So some of our business units have very strong analysts and analytic functions within their business unit. So we usually come to them and say, okay, what reporting do you need? What can we help with? And, where can we assist? We have others, though, that's not their forte. That's not their niche, or they don't have the capacity. And so we come in and we say, all right, what do you need? One of our mantras is often, we do not build it and forget it. So all the reporting that we have, it's a lot, but we are constantly asking the question. So my analysts meet with their business units regularly. Sometimes that's a weekly cadence. Sometimes it's biweekly. It just sort of depends what works for them. Sometimes it's monthly, and sometimes it's, we haven't heard from you, so we're not calling until you call us. And that's okay too, right? We're always there. So I always say, ask your business units what report they're not using. Like if you built them a report and they're not using it, what's the why behind it? Is it not relevant? Did we not build it to standards? Does it not make sense? Can you not read it? Like what's going on? And it's not because we're after a bad thing. It's we're trying to understand, why is this so important? Like it was important here. You know, do we not produce? How can we make it better? The conversations we have are incredible. And then if that wasn't enough, on a weekly basis, my team meets once a week. So we actually met this morning before I came over here, and we start talking about, you know, what have you learned? What's going on? So I think one of the most awesome things that I pride myself on is when my team meets, we know the entire enterprise story. Like we're sitting there and we know, like, oh, I met with this person and they're talking about this or I heard this. And so we're starting to say, like, hey, did you know, like, this is going on over here? Can we build a correlation here? So then you start to get to that predictive piece. You start to get to the analytic piece. Like we're always thinking, we're always on the forefront. And so we're trying not to just always be responsive to what people are asking us. We're also trying to help bridge gaps and create communication.
You're trying to be proactive as well.
Yes.
And it sounds like your group is starting to get an anticipation and an understanding of what the different groups, marketing, HR, et cetera, kind of need. That's awesome. And there's a couple of things that you mentioned there that I really liked. One of them was around working with and interfacing and collaborating with the business, especially in a proactive way. I think that's huge. The second piece is around, so, you know, I have a pretty strong product background. And so whenever I hear product themes and what folks are talking about, I get very excited. And, you know, people talk a lot about data as a product. And I think there's another aspect, which is sort of like reporting and analytics as a product. And it seems like you're taking a very product-centric approach here. Yeah. There's a surface area, there's a maintenance and sort of a keeping up with these different assets. And if people aren't using the product, then maybe that product shouldn't exist, that type of an approach. Do you kind of think of it as like life cycle management or something like that? Or is it a little bit more dynamic than that?
To be fair, I think sometimes we really are just like, let's get it out there. Right. And I mean that in the sense of we're going to try something, we're going to put it out there. But yes, we are thinking about it absolutely like the life cycle. You're going to put it out there, you're going to be the early adopter. What works, what doesn't. We're gathering ideas from people. But again, we always go back to those relationships, I think, because in any product, people become attached, right? Like I've met a lot of amazing people who are very passionate about this report that they helped stand up. And then maybe we have to go to them and say, well, is this too intense? Can the average person read it? Is this really what's gonna matter? Maybe it matters for you and your department, and that's why we're going to put in your department app. But does this exact version need to go here? Does it need to go there? We also get a lot of so people chat and they're like, oh, the Power BI team did this or they did this, and everyone's like, I want a copy and I want a copy. Okay, great. But then all of a sudden that's going to be information overload. So like, what version can we give you? Sort of what's the why behind it? You almost become like a detective. And so sometimes I find myself having a very delicate conversation about, are you sure you need that? Like, maybe let's go talk to them. Right. And it's because it's like a toy. Like, I want that. And it's great to be in high demand. But how do you manage that high demand?
Right.
So I think that's how we really think of our product. But we are into this 2.5 years. And again, we learn something new every day, so we've put some reports out that we're like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best way, or like, how can we learn? How can we manage, building the structure and stuff to get us what we're doing.
So the information overload is something super fascinating, because it seems like at LCG, it is very, very data literate. Is that because this is one of the things I talk about a lot, is like data literacy. One of our former guests, Malcolm Hawker, and we talk about this, and we say data literacy, like that's not the word we should be using, because that implies that people are illiterate to data. I'm like, it's like, what do you mean? So because you can't understand it, then it's your fault? It's like, but why do we assume it's your fault because you don't understand data? Maybe you built the wrong thing, right? If I go build something, people doesn't buy, they don't know how to go use it, I can't tell the consumer, oh, you're illiterate for my product. Like, you should have known better. It's like, no, you probably designed the wrong product, right? But it's not the same mentality with the data. But what I really love, what I'm hearing here, is that you are taking that extra step in saying, yes, you already know things, but also let's understand what you're trying to interpret. And so this is this great relationship that you're building with the consumers of your data. And I think this is what's missing a lot. I'm really excited about hearing about this. Anyways, I'm just really excited.
I
Well,
think
no,
that's good. Yeah.
To follow up with that, so I had the opportunity to take I received a master's certificate in business analytics, which I know is kind of random, but one of the takeaways I had from the program was a professor was very adamant and said, you have to remember the average person cannot read a graph. And I was sitting there listening to this, and I'm like, so you're telling me all my work and the average person can't read it? That's what I really interpreted, right? And that's not the correct thing. But if you take a step back and you peel back what she was saying, it was pretty remarkable, because you're passionate about it, and I can be passionate about it, and you can be passionate about it. But we're all going to look at the same chart, and we're going to see something different. Mm-hmm. We're all going to look at the same graph. We're going to see something different. And so again, when you put something out there and you understand it and you know every avenue of it, and you're like, and this is how they should read it, and this is how they should interpret it. So part of my role has really turned into just focusing on the end user, because I'm always fascinated when people don't use it. So we can look up usage metrics, right? And we can see, and I'm not doing this to be like, I built that report and I better see a 95% usage rate or it wasn't worth my time. Mm-hmm. I want to know why. Right. Why isn't it? And so I've started having an amazing opportunity. I've partnered with our training department, and we've started putting out literature on how to read and interpret reporting. And it's been really, really cool to watch, because I have learned so much about why people maybe a little bit nervous. And a lot of times, I find myself on the phone and I'm like, okay, just click on the graph. I promise you're not going to mess it up. We're going to do this, And I think sometimes people are like, really? That's I'm like, that's it. I'm going to screw it up. I'm going to screw it up, right? You can click, I promise. And it's just taking that little step and almost that empowerment. And all of a sudden you see the switch. It's awesome.
This is a big aha moment right now. You look at usage metric, you're like, oh, this is not being used. This was a bad thing. This was not the report they wanted. But it's like, wait, we should approach this more in a human aspect. Maybe people were a bit afraid of, they didn't know. They didn't know. Let's kind of give a little bit more of training around it, and then they feel more comfortable, and suddenly that usage can increase, because that's a very important point. I think we can interpret the graph so many different ways, but at the end of the day, one thing is we can be very quantitative, but a lot of this is very qualitative. We got to go talk to the people. And this is one of my frustrations that I have with a lot of the data folks who don't talk to people. It's data is a social technical phenomena here. You can't just look at it from a technical point of view and never talk to users.
Yeah, you can't just stay in the silo and only look at the usage metrics and just say, oh, well, I guess this dashboard's no good or something like that. You have to actually understand how it's going to be used and what they were trying to accomplish.
So another thing that you brought up was about having the different teams. You mentioned there's checks and balances between your team reports and finance, and then there's still the IT team. This is a very interesting aspect of how reporting is. I'm always interested in how organizations organize all their data teams and what they report to. So how is that relationship with the other tech side, and what does the checks and balances mean to you?
Absolutely. So there's a few different things I think are pretty remarkable about the way that we have structured this. You can Google any way to set up a data and reporting team, and there's going to be a lot of different ideas out there. So specifically, the one that we went to is, I like to say, is almost like a centralized reporting team. Mm-hmm. Our model really is self-service analytics. That being said, we have amazing relationships with all of our partners, but specifically IT. Because what happens is if a report looks wrong, if it doesn't look right, the end user doesn't know who to call. So it's usually one ticket into IT, ironically, and most people think our team sits in IT, and we don't. It doesn't matter, but we sit in a whole nother business unit for a reason, and that reason is really around saying, we are with you as a business. We get the business, but we also are going to talk that tech side, and so we sit there and we really bridge the gap. And we have had to have a very open and honest, transparent conversation with both sides about, we're going to take this what I like to say is very raw and ugly data, because that's what it is. Added, like, anyone look at a SQL query, like, that's not cute. Like, it's raw, and it's there, but it's not pretty. And then we interpret.
I'm gonna quote you on that. Have you ever looked at a SQL query? That's not cute. That needs to get a t-shirt.
What do you say? Like, it's not, right? I mean, it's even I look at it, I'm like, oh God, okay. But again, the average person isn't going to look at a SQL query and know how to interpret that, and that's okay. So a lot of times I tell people what I do, and they're like, really? You do what? And I'm like, trust me, you don't want me in the schools teaching your children. Like, that they're experts for that, and that's not me. But I'm going to help, and we're going to bridge that gap, and we're going to have the conversation. So I think in a roundabout way, I'm asking or answering your question. What we do is so relationship based at its heart. It's about going, because of the relationships we have to IT, and saying, hey, listen, we were looking at this one data warehouse table. We noticed this. We think it's this. Like, we're not just saying, hey, we think we have a problem, go figure it out. Like, we're fully there working with them, trying to figure it out, trying to be that proactive partner. And then we're with the business unit saying, you know what, we checked the data. We know it's accurate. We know it's right. And here's some of the ways we can interpret it. And here's how we can present that. Maybe it's a challenge, or, because again, not every story is going to be good. Mm-hmm. If this was perfect and we all had these great stories, our teams probably wouldn't exist. So I often, I tell my team a lot, which, to be fair, they roll their eyes at me a lot, because they're like, oh, here's another Kristen quote, but here we go. I love always saying to them, listen, great analytics and great reporting is going to answer their 3 questions, and it's going to probe 3 more at least. And if we ever come to a place where we stop prompting questions, we are out of jobs. So let's build reporting that's going to prompt those questions, right? Because we need to make sure that we always have jobs. But in all seriousness, that's, I think, what's really important. And it's being that partner to both sides, which I think is so important. So again, yeah, we report into finance, but we sort of are kind of in our own little world. And again, we just have such amazing relationships with every area of the business that we just get this opportunity. So I almost sell it as like hey, you want some reporting? All right, tell me a little bit about your business. Like, we're going to exchange here, right? Like, tell me more. And then learn and grow. And so to be able to watch my team of analysts and just how much they know about the business has been absolutely rewarding for me, because I think sometimes they even surprise themselves about everything that they're learning, and it's just awesome.
You are hitting this nail of the business literacy. Like, we need to be able. It's not just about data literacy. We need to get into the business literacy, understand how the business works. So, if I understand correctly, so you are a centralized kind of reporting team, but there are business units who also do their own analytical reporting functions.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and then there's also a centralized IT team,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have these great relationships, and it seems like you also kind of have this. You're in the middle, right? You can manage the business conversation and the IT conversation, so you can manage that. When do you become a bottleneck then?
Well, we don't think we are.
You don't think you are, but do other people think? When does your team of 5 need to be a team of 10 or 20? And is that scalable?
So I will
Honest,
say this.
no BS here.
Yeah, I know. All right, we're going there. So here's one thing. So first, I would say that yes, in almost every meeting I laugh, because there's always somebody from the Power BI team present. Like, it's kind of what people are used to now. It's almost like phone a friend, like phone us and we'll be there. So we're becoming sort of that consultant. There are, I believe, conversations that take place every day, and any business will have them, about what does the future look like? What is the next step, right? Do we start to have more analytics? Is it just reporting? Is it, the irony is, and especially working in predictive analytics, I often find myself saying, listen, if I could predict the future, I would predict the lottery numbers, and then I would actually retire early, right? But like, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So I can't predict the future, and I don't know what's going to happen. But I do know that we have an incredibly supportive leadership that does have a pulse on our team. They know we have a huge workload, but we also have amazing partners who are so willing to take their time. So one of the things we started challenging back to try not to be a bottleneck is we all are managing our workloads and constantly saying like, okay, well, I'm working with this and I've got this and I've got to figure this all out. And how is it? And then I got to make sure that the team doesn't get overwhelmed. They've got a good work-life balance. It's incredibly important to me. We can't be burned out. And so where I'm going with this is we often say in a very honest way, listen, I see your priority, but I've got this other one right now. So here's some options. I can produce this report that's not going to tell you everything, but maybe you take it and go because you are one of our business units that has a little bit more capacity to maybe do some of your own analytics. Okay. So we leverage what we have. We don't have the same model for every team. Sometimes just by saying, I need a week because I have something else, and we've got the relationship and people know like, oh, it's not like they're sitting there not doing anything. Like we know they're busy. And so sometimes they end up answering their own questions and then they come back to us with like something random anyway. And we're like, okay, cool. Like, do you still need the other thing though? Cause like we're ready, but
so it's not just like a one size fits all kind of internal SLA. It's really each group
yes.
has their own needs and own relationships.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the evidence of like you can't have like a cookie cutter approach. Like this is the human side of things,
sort of
right?
like this is the way.
This is the framework how we're going to establish things.
Works,
I mean,
right? Yeah.
I mean, I guess you want to have that, and you probably may start with that. But at the end of the day, like you need to have these personal relationships. And I think that's the key takeaway here.
Yeah.
Another topic is communication.
My favorite.
Okay, so why is that your favorite, and how do you incentivize for having documentation and up to date and everything?
Yeah, some people would say documentation is not cute either. So curious about your thoughts there.
Oh, right. So no, I love a good process. And anyone who's watching this who knows me is cracking up at this point. So we are new, and when we started this, it was like, okay, let's build a reporting team. And so thankfully, coming from a background that I have, so I've spent the majority of my career up until now as an analyst. And I always just got really good at documenting like all my desk procedures. That was just always my thing, because if I wanted to take a day off, I could be like, hey, here, can you do this report while I'm out? And just follow these and let me know if you have any questions, right? So that was just always my thing. And I'm also really organized. So again, it's just my thing. As far as incentivizing, it sometimes has been a challenge to find the time. So there was actually a period this past spring where we went in a 3-day shutdown, and everyone blocked their calendars, and we really just didn't take any work, and we went in a full shutdown. And I mean, this is like not innovative or anything. It's a Microsoft OneNote, and we were like, all right, here's our OneNote. Everyone start putting in your desk procedures. And I just sold it as, if you guys want to take a day off, we need to know what to do when you're not here, right? Like that could happen. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and so you got to know how to do my job, right? But then part of it became too is, and most of my career as an analyst, I actually spent in banking. So audits are a huge thing in banking. And so I spent a lot of time always talking to an auditor, and I always found that they would, start asking me sort of the process and the procedure. And if you had it together, I always felt like the conversation was like over pretty quickly. So maybe that's a little intel or just Kristen world, I don't know. But so I just always started documenting everything. And so now I always ask like the question about like, okay, well, why did you publish the report? If an auditor came to you and said, hey, why did you publish this report? Because what we do is, I mean, we're dealing with very highly sensitive, confidential data. Like we can't just put it out for anybody. So we started like asking the question. So we now have procedures for everything. So all of our Power BI apps have full documentation on why, who has access. We quarterly audit who's looking at stuff. We have procedures, like I call them desk procedures, but like any of our static monthly reports. But then we also started putting stuff in our team about like, hey, did you see this, YouTube video on like some DAX formula or something, because like we're still all learning this as we go. So I think a huge role of what we do, or what I remind myself is, I don't think I'm that old. Like, I've only been out of college for 15 years, but that's like ancient in this world. So when I graduated, business intelligence wasn't a thing. It's probably why I have a master's certificate in business analytics, right? Because that wasn't a thing. I found an intern along the way who's like, "Oh yeah, I'm at Virginia Tech. My major is business intelligence." I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" Like, I'm that old? Like,
the world's changed.
like, okay, I get it. Like, I'm that old. But why that becomes important is, I don't want to say we're all making it up as we go, but we're all learning it as we go, right? Like, okay, maybe we are, but we really are doing this, to understand. And there's no right or wrong way to stand up a reporting team, to stand up a BI team. So you figure out what works for your company.
I love that.
I like that last quote. The we're not making this up as we go. We're really learning on the go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
We're gonna get a lot of t-shirts by the time this
Yes,
conversation
there's
is
like
done.
5 t-shirts already at this.
I'm very
This is
excited.
so good. I mean, there's so many other questions that come to mind and things like that. But honestly, maybe it makes sense to go ahead and jump into our lightning round, because I think we've got some
Yeah, we
good
got
topics
all right.
there.
We got our lightning round questions. It was
Yeah.
presented by Data.World. So I'll go to the first one.
Mm.
Should analysts reach out directly to people in the business and ask for meetings with decision makers?
Why not?
Yeah.
I guess I just live in this world of, especially when I was an analyst, again, if I found somebody who was willing to sort of trust me, I'd be like, "Listen, I don't know what's going on, or I don't get what all this is, right?
Mhm.
Like, help me." They're going to help you in return. I am not a fan of when people sit in meetings and they use all these acronyms and they sort of just talk, and everyone else is like, "What are they saying? Like, I don't get it." That's not me. That's never going to be me. And so I just, like, why can't we all know the same thing, right? I always say, like, level the playing field, right? And I think that that's why, like, people are people, and they're going to remember how you treated them. And data is an incredibly scary topic. Why can't an analyst, within reason? I mean, I don't know that I would have called the CEO as an analyst and like, "Hey, sir, how's it going? Like, can I see what your problems are?
What you think about the business?
You don't have anything important to do, right? I gotcha."
But that being said, right?
Exactly.
Understand the business.
And yes,
Yeah.
so I
Business literacy.
Second question.
yes.
Folks often get very excited about data democratization as kind of a concept, and think about, everyone has access to BI tools and things like that as like one example of that. Is data democratization the right thing to focus on?
Well, I'm probably going to toe the line on this one. So I would say that I think it depends where your business is at, right? Like, every user group is going to be different. So I think you need to know who is really about your organization, where are they at, and where are they going. So for instance, if you are in an environment that is like a high turnover environment, people are constantly going to have to learn your business before they can start getting into the problem solving, right? Because you show up at a job, you're going to need 6 months to learn. It's just my personal opinion. No one's going to learn your business overnight. So you, to me, have to focus your data, your structure, I think, based on your company and your people. You can't necessarily just say, "Okay, this is it." But again, I think after this conversation, we've all learned that I'm not like a one size fits all kind of person either. So I think it depends on your company.
Mm-hmm.
All right, third question.
Yes.
Do you think that the approach you've implemented at Learning Care Group is kind of sort of like a data mesh model, or is that the completely different, doesn't apply here?
Can you define data mesh?
All right, that's a good answer right there.
Yeah, agreed.
That was part of the trick. the funny question there, but all right.
All right. Fourth question.
Okay.
And I'm actually going to break the mold a little bit with this one, because we
Okay.
usually do yes/no questions, but I wanted to break this. I wanted to add this hint in here. Is there a trend in data or analytics that you're most excited about?
I am super excited that, to me, I feel like years ago, the analytics and the data function kind of sat in this little group, no matter where it was at. And it was a group that was privy to it. And there was the one, and it probably went to executive leadership. And I think today, regardless of the organization, regardless of the industry, regardless of the structure, data is out there for everybody.
Mhm.
And if you want it, you will have access to it. And so to me, the trend is that more and more companies or organizations or industries are going to everybody gets it. The key is if you want it, because again, you can build it, but will they come?
Mm.
And so I think for me, it's more of an access to everybody. And obviously that creates challenges, but I think that that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
That's very nice. All right, Tim. Tim, take us away with takeaways.
All
What do you got?
right. Takeaways. So many good takeaways here. So we really started off with just being a little bit mind boggled by the scale that y'all have been able to achieve in terms of the 21,000 person employee organization with a 5-person data team. And you mentioned that it's really all about teamwork, that you've got, this license capacity for all these different age ranges. You've got all these different employees, a lot of teachers, but you also have a lot of hierarchy as well. So the director level, the regional level, and then you've got the central group that kind of serves them all to support central. And so really, within that structure, teamwork has been key, and really asking the questions, what reporting do you need? What reporting needs to change? And what story are you trying to tell? And I think that's powerful from a scope standpoint, because it helps the organization see, hey, we're here to help. We're here to treat this like a product and keep it going over time, and really help the rest of the organization to accomplish the things that it needs to accomplish with the stories that they're trying to tell with data. And I think what's great also is that you mentioned about the partnerships that you have with other key supporting functions like IT, like the governance group, et cetera, and being able to work together to get the data that you need and develop the things that you need. You said that we're in the business of storytelling. We need to tell an accurate story. Each analyst has their niche, right? And you have to work with all these different groups, HR, finance, marketing, and they all have the different things that they're driving for. Some of these groups have analytics functions already, and some do not. And so you really have to learn, what are these different groups trying to do? And the analytics team sees the bigger picture. And so you're able to actually piece together more of that enterprise story. Always things go back to relationships. And I think that's probably the biggest theme that I took away from all of this, was building relationships with the business, with the data team. You use the word consultant a few times, really that idea that you're partnering with the business and helping them not just accomplish the stories that they're trying to get to, but also manage information overload. And there's, this aspect you mentioned of being a detective, really making sure that, is this the thing that's going to help them the most? Because the different parts of the business might not always know that, this isn't really the appropriate thing. It's a consulting aspect that you're doing there to help them get to the right thing.
Yeah.
Juan, what about you? What were your takeaways?
So I get a couple more to add here. One, the usage metrics. Now, this is something we need to measure. We need to measure things. I think we need to measure usage, but we need to be able to interpret the usage. And I think a lot of the times, like, it's not being used, it's a bad thing, but let's understand the why. I think over everything, it's why. I love this case. It's like, maybe somebody's using it because they just didn't feel comfortable. They need a little bit more training. You get them more comfortable, and then they'll start using it. So it's really, really important, having the usage metrics and getting behind the why. So your team setup. So you are a centralized reporting team underneath finance. You have a great relationships with IT, and everything. Again, the theme here is just relationships. Build relationships with everybody. Other different business units, they will have their own type of analytical functions too. And I think one of the issues about kind of being on, when it comes to scalability, we're talking about is like, let's just be transparent with priorities, saying, yes, we're busy right now with the following. We can't do it right now. Maybe next week. Maybe you can do it yourself. And those are the different approaches how to go deal with this and being able to go manage it. I think a couple fun quotes. You take raw, ugly data. Have you looked at that SQL query? That's not cute. I'm going to put that on a T-shirt for sure. Another one is great analytics will prompt more questions. And that's a good thing, because otherwise we're out of a job. That's another good one right there. And if people are asking for reporting, it's like, yeah, we'll give you some reporting, but you got to tell me more about your business. And then on documentation, I see it also as another way to scale. And I like how you say, you want to take your day off, right? You want other people to do your work? Well, document it so that people will do your work. That's why you shut down for 3 days, and let's just document our procedures. And another interesting tidbit here is, like, coming from the finance world, is like finance and regulations is, hey, if I had those conversations with those regulatory folks and I had all my documentation,
Oh,
that was a easy conversation. So yeah, that's actually a way to get out of hard conversations, have it documented. But if I'm going to summarize our discussion, it's really data is about relationships. It's a people thing. It's really about understanding the business.
You guys hit the nail on the head.
Did we do?
100%.
Anything we missed?
No, I think you guys got covered.
All right. So throw it back to you. Three
Okay.
final questions.
Yes.
What's your advice about data, life, whatever? Second, who should we invite next? And third, what resources do you follow? People, books, blogs, conferences, and so on.
Okay, so the first one is, what is my advice? On a very personal level, this is for anyone out there who is listening. I personally have a career that I don't think a lot of people ever thought I would have. I think I often am a circle trying to fit in the square peg, per se. But I have stayed persistent and I've stayed true to myself. I am truly blessed to have the team that I have. And I cannot say that enough. I would be doing a disservice if I didn't just show how amazing that they are. And I say all the time, like, I'm getting to build the team that I always wanted to sit on as an analyst. My way is not necessarily for everybody. But at the end of the day, I know that I can go to bed and that I have done everything by the book to the right standards. I've made the best choices I can. And so for anyone listening, regardless of where you're at, especially with working with something like data, because it is ugly, it's not cute, stay true to yourself and be willing to put yourself out there. And I think that is why I have gotten to where I am, because of that.
That's awesome.
And as far as who you should invite next, so I'm not going to name any names online, but I did allude to the fact I grew up in the banking and finance. A lot of it was spent in the credit union space. So I've listened to a lot of your podcasts, and I don't think you've had anyone from the credit union space. And so if you need some names, I'll give you.
Oh, that's interesting.
But credit unions are, I'm not really doing a shameless plug about where you should bank, but what I am saying is that credit unions and the way that they're structured, I know personally, I had a lot of great opportunities to learn a lot of different things that I do today, because credit unions are smaller. And so you get to see a lot, you get to do a lot. And so if you need some names after, I'll give them. But I think some credit union people, they have some really good ideas. So
Ooh, awesome.
shout out to the credit
We'll
union.
take you up on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then last, what resources do I follow? Okay. So I'm not even going to try to pretend added through. I'm a mom of two very young kids. So my world is like Disney Plus and Junior. So I don't have a ton of time to follow, but Paw Patrol, I got you covered. Chase is on the case. So what I would say is I do, I usually Google a lot, like, oh, is there a new trend or something? But I actually, if I get the chance, I love to read autobiographies of people who have been successful and how they've gotten to where they were in their careers. So I read George Bush's book, which was pretty cool. I read Joe Paterno's book, which was pretty cool. I recently finished Shoe Dog by Phil Knight of Nike. So I love to read those success stories about like where they got to and kind of what was their like pivotal moment where they were like, all right, we're going to do this or we're going to fail. And there's some pretty cool some things in there. So I would say that.
That's awesome. Those are some great recommendations for our listeners to check out. Yeah.
So,
Well,
right.
This is a phenomenal conversation. As always, thanks to Data Our World, who lets us do this every Wednesday and or whatever day today is. And freaking
Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to everyone, and cheers to relationships.
Cheers.
This is Catalog and Cocktails. A special thanks to Data.World for supporting the show, Carly Berghoff for producing, John Loyens and Brian Jacob for the show music, and thank you to the entire Catalog and Cocktails fan